This week's episode is sponsored by Samsung.
You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For 50 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. My name is Alan Weitz.
And I'm Jill Waterman.
And no doubt our audio engineer, Mike Weinstein, will be piping in with a question or two along the way. Julia Blaukopf is not afraid to think big, particularly when it comes to her photographs. She's also not afraid of blurring the lines between fine art and commercial enterprise. I like her already. Equal parts photographer, designer, visual artist, and entrepreneur, in 2010, Julia launched Fotografica, an arts products venture with the goal of re-envisioning options for photography and photo-based products. In the years since, she's been commissioned by architects, designers, and developers to create architectural scale works and other custom photo-based installations. Her self-described brainstorm set against the wall now grace the walls of restaurants, private homes, apartment lobbies, and co-working spaces. And if that's not enough, she's also a documentarian with a passion for women's empowerment and social justice. Julia has worked with the initiatives that aid female entrepreneurs to support their families through their own business ventures in a variety of countries. Sharing these stories in photography allows her to deeply understand her subjects' lives and experiences and to visually capture the ability to galvanize change. Julia Blaukopf, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you for that amazing intro.
I polished real good to do that one. Okay, here we go. First question for you. This is an interesting way of taking a business. Where did you first get the idea for making photo-based, wall installations? Was this a client request, or was this something that you sort of cooked up at 2 a.m. when you were twisting and turning, trying to figure out where to go next?
Yeah, well, it started with my fine art, my documentary and exhibiting. And for me, I was a darkroom photographer. So when I embraced digital back in 2004, my way of feeling creative was through collaborating with printers. It was when we were starting to print on fabric and photo-based tile and glass. And there were different companies out of North Carolina collaborating with people in craft fine arts. So that's where the seed for it really emerged, was talking to different fabricators. And at the time, I was very early in my career. So I was working in a lot of artist residencies, and I was able to have more facilities open to me. So this idea of transferring my imagery to different surfaces really came out of a lot of collaborating with book artists, collage artists. In the very beginning, I was transferring my photographs to tape, to packaging tape, that you can, in fact, find archival tape. So that was part of the early stages of what has now become the large installation work.
I got to stop you right here. I'm stuck on that one thing. I remember when digital came out and inkjet printing became really big. And they actually came out with inks that would not fade in 90 days. So you could actually think about taking large projects and putting them in places where light won't affect them as much. But you just said you're doing photos on wrapping tape?
Yeah. Well,
how did you get there? I mean, I was saying, I got this great photograph. I know, I'm going to put it on tape. I mean, you got to give me a story on this one. I'm sorry.
Well, so I have to give credit to my art school, University of the Arts in Philly. And
okay.
And we had a class on alternative processes. And of course, it was tintype and the cyanotype and all of the various alternative photo practices and gum bichromate that I loved at the time, and that access with printmaking. But the tape transfers are really simple. You take archival packaging tape that's clear, and you rub it against a photocopy of a photograph, and you put in water, and the back rubs off. And then I took that. I wasn't printing on the tape. The ink was quite literally transferred to the tape.
I thought you were doing merry wrapping tape for
no.
holiday.
No.
Oh, I get it.
No,
yeah.
So using the tape transferring the ink to the tape and then applying that to wooden surfaces. And mind you, this is before I really even knew about printing on wood. It was something that allowed me to sort of take a very simple process and transfer it to any surface that worked with it. And it also allowed me to work in the moment because I'm not the best at being premeditated about my work. It's like dance. It's like very in the moment. And it allowed me to play, to be honest, back then. So that was the origin of what I do now. But I don't know that that is a very good explanation of how I got to where I am.
No. I get it. I remember when Epson had three kinds of paper: glossy, matte, and luster or pearl, I think they called it.
Yeah.
And I used to just go to art supply stores and buy all kinds of sheets of material and papers just to see what will go in one end and come out the other with an image on it. And a lot of it was just disasters and horrible. But one question I have for you: you were printing like on wood and all this stuff. What kind of printers were you using? Because most printers will not take anything thicker than, say, about 1/8 of an inch. So how are you printing on these kind of thick items?
Back then when I was, this is 2004, 5, 6. Back then, it was the tape transfers, and then I would do, not wet plate collodion, what was it?
Were you working with liquid light and all?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
I did a
okay.
wet plate collodion workshop at Peters Valley.
So it was still analog based. That's my question. This wasn't all digital. Oh, okay. That explains it. Okay, now I get it.
And back then, what I was doing without realizing it, that informs what I do now, was I was creating really solid relationships with bigger printers. I lived in Philly, and it was a place where you really could collaborate, and still can, no doubt, with people who are printing on all kinds of interesting materials. Because for me personally, I don't enjoy printing myself digitally. So that's where I love collaborating with people who are really good at it and really psyched about printing on all different kinds of materials.
Did you work with any organizations or companies outside of Philadelphia? The reason why I ask, I was just curious if you ever worked with, say, Dugal Color Projects in Manhattan.
I know them. The price point was too high for me back then.
Oh, okay. So you should have talked to us, because a good friend, Jay Tannen, was in charge of all their large photo installations. He's actually been a guest on our show early on. I could have introduced you and got you a major discount, but that's over now. No.
I know.
The reason why I was asking, I know that Dugal was one of the pioneers when it came into covering buildings with photographs and huge museum installations. I mean, they tackled some really huge projects and it was really all cutting edge. That's why I was asking, because it is very, very interesting that photography is more and more around, not just on people's phones, but it's not uncommon to walk into a bank and see like the street that you just walked down, but from 100 years ago. And that's a very typical thing.
It's the difference from 20 years ago to now. I mean, I still remember in art school going to lectures where someone would say, raise your hand if you're still using analog. And most people raise their hand. And this person would say, oh, well, in 5, 10 years, get ready for it to be flipped. And of course, now it's a whole different landscape. And again, back then I was working with what we had. And I was young. I didn't really know what I was doing.
Well, but that's the key to it. That's the key.
Yeah.
That's one of the beauties of being young, is that, you don't know what works and what doesn't work yet. You're not jaded or anything like that. You don't have any preconceptions.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. You get to play because everything is new. All right?
Exactly.
Everything is new.
Exactly. And I think as an exhibiting artist, it's very different than having to appease clients and create, of course, a living. Exhibiting, you quite frankly can experiment a lot and see what comes out of it. And that's a really beautiful part of it. So, yeah.
So, Julia, you got your first major photo-based wallpaper project in 2013. How did you get to that point?
So at that point, I was in full experimental mode. And I thought, how can I make exhibits more meaningful? And the work that I was doing with different nonprofits, I wanted it to really be relevant to that. So that said, I was printing on photo-based tile, glass, fabric, canvas. And I was around really entrepreneurial people at that point in my life. I was really lucky. And a lot of the designers. And something else that emerged from being part of the Philadelphia arts community was helping me foster what I was doing. So I was able to meet people from the architecture community, interior design, curatorial areas. And I ended up meeting an architect as I was walking around with these photo-based tiles in my bag. And I said, oh, hey, like, here's what I'm doing. I think it'd be so cool for a kitchen backsplash or something. I didn't even know. I had no idea.
Mm.
And this architect, Alan Metcalf, he said, these are really cool, but you can't like walk around with some tiles. And another very small developer had used them in one of his backsplash projects, again, like 15 years ago in Philly. And the architect said, you know what? I'm working on a project, a restaurant in Mount Airy in Philadelphia. And we don't really have a budget, but I'd love for you to have your first project. So maybe you could fundraise, have the tiles be part of a wall installation, one of the accent walls. And I had had experience fundraising in the past for my projects. And I thought, okay, I think I can make this happen. And then I met the interior designer working on the project who was, I guess I'll say, kind of a visionary, just in terms of, oh, I could see us doing this or this or this, was really excited to think about new ideas with photography and design. And this designer, Val Nejas, ended up saying, you know what, let's work with wall vinyl because that's a lot less expensive. And I think we could embed that into the budget. And then I thought, great, I'm not going to get paid for this, but I don't have to fundraise for it. And that's how the first project was created. And then I had my education and learning the process from that point. And that was a very custom project, which I guess I'll say the more intricate projects that I do are more custom. So it was really a fantastic education because I was working with really cool people.
What was the imagery for that first project?
So that was a restaurant that was a brand new renovation. And I didn't know anything about design. I didn't know architectural drawings, anything like that at the time. I just thought, oh, you measure a wall and then you do this. So for that project, the designer really did help lead the idea for the project. The restaurant had been kind of an iconic restaurant in the community, and it's a very tight-knit community in Mount Airy. And they were turning it into a restaurant called Goat Hollow. And they said, what if we photograph this backyard that's pretty raw with vines growing everywhere? And we're going to demolish a lot of it, but let's document it and have a piece of history and then see how that can become part of the wallpaper. And at the time, I had no idea what I was doing, but I said, yes, that sounds great. And so I photographed the back and I photographed from the restaurant that was completely raw space at the time. And it turned into panels of wallpaper because at the time, when I thought about wallpaper, I thought of 3-foot, 4-foot panels of wallpaper, of reams. So it is a sequence of reams of wallpaper that vary from very nature-oriented with vines on top and muted colors to a scene that was in fact out the window at the time that then became a different building. So it was not intentional, but it was very cool because it became kind of a document of what historically had been there. And now that informs a lot of my work because, as we know, our cities are constantly being developed and there's a lot of nostalgia around what they were. So that was the first project in 2013. I think at the time, the designer led the project, whereas now I know how to lead the project. But that took many years of things going wrong, things going well.
Yeah, it's called learning, the learning curve.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's part of anything. I think one of the beauties of what you're doing here is that I would say that many photographers who earn a living with their cameras, it's not unusual you have a client call you up and say, I saw some of these winter landscapes you did. They're absolutely amazing. I have a pair of these beige penny loafers I need photographed on a white background. You think you could throw some of that same magic into this for an ad we're doing? And of course, you really got to stretch your imagination to pull that one off. But here, you are working on projects where you are going to be choosing what the subject matter is, or how you're going to be handling the subject matter. But it really is your image that you are capturing to fit into a space rather than try to force your style to fit a different product or a different category that may not even work with. Here they're saying, you have an eye, we like your eye, and here's a space that we're trying to convert, and we want you to lead this whole thing, which is what you're doing now. That's unique because you really do have a lot of say in what the final image is going to be as far as aesthetics and creativity. And you don't always get that. You might get a nice paycheck, but quite often there's no satisfaction in the work.
Right. I think I've been very lucky that I've been able to take the work that feels more narrative, documentary, fine art, travel, black and white, nature, city, and for people to understand my work and to say, hey, I have this idea. I don't know if it can work out. Can we collaborate? And I use the word collaborate loosely when I talk about my work with clients, because of course there's more of a dynamic in there. But architects, designers, and with some clients, how do we work together to say, you have this certain style? How do we fit that into our space? But then on the flip side, for me, my work is to listen to my clients and say, okay, you're a developer with brand new offices and you want to highlight all of your past buildings that you've bought, sold, whatever, your portfolio. Let's take that. And what's your color palette? And I mean, that's where the design comes in. It's like, okay, what colors are we working with? Black and white, sepia, blue. I had a project with a really fantastic designer in Philly, Eileen Tuanini, wherein I researched historic blueprints at City Hall and then infused that into the collage that then wove together the historic properties that the developer had in his portfolio. So rather than a timeline on the wall of, oh, this is my first building, second building, third building, we took all of the buildings and we turned it into something that was really dynamic. And that was led by the designer. So it's like if you're a writer, you're led by the editor. And when you're exhibiting, you hope you're kind of collaborating with the curator. And with this, it's really learning the language of where the designer and the architect are coming from.
And there's a conceptual level to that kind of interaction of turning a visual idea into something physical.
Exactly. I call the first step therapy. Just letting loose. What do you want? What is the psychology of it? I work with residents, hospitality, corporate, which is fantastic. Every project presents its own challenge. And it's psychology no matter what. Because if you're in your home, what do you want to surround your home in? And if it's hospitality, it's not even about your personal taste. It's like, what do you want people to walk into that they're going to feel, this is a really cool place? And sometimes that is the psychology program. I want you to create a really cool place. And that's a really hard one. But yeah, I mean, that's sort of what guides it. The very first meeting is really important. And then it breaks into, okay, what's the space? What are the dimensions? What's the material that we're working on?
You mentioned color and the blueprints and all that. Are there certain colors that are easier to work with based on things like fading and longevity and just even aesthetics?
Yeah, I recently learned because I had a project photographing trees and then printing that on glass. So I worked with a fabricator in Secaucus, New Jersey. And I learned that glass fabricators hate the color red. And I said to my client, let's not do red because I want it to be simple.
Well, if you've ever seen an old Dunkin' Donuts sign, they ain't pretty. A lot of colors don't hold up.
Well, in my research of what materials to print on, I've spent a lot of time touring different printing houses. And one of them does all of the banners for the football games and everything. Because I had a moment where I thought, oh, how cool. Just print on a big banner. And it's like the iPhone billboard in New York where they say this was printed on an iPhone. And you think like, oh my God, that's so far away from all of us. It's like literally existing in the sky. Like no one can dissect the actual like pixels that are happening up there. But what I've learned through my work is that I have to align with the right printers who know how to work with architects and designers and who know how to provide not even light fading, fire code.
Mm.
Oh,
There's
sure.
a public housing project in Brooklyn. They were so concerned about that more than fading, more than anything. Was like, no, this needs to be to code. This is going to exist in the lobby of what's quote unquote public housing. So, on an architectural standpoint, I have to think about that more than fading because now the colors and the printing quality does have a lot of integrity when it comes to wall vinyl and glass and Sintra.
But even under the best in circumstances, if using the most stable print media and the finest, say, pigment inks or whatever inks you'd be using for that particular installation, there is a limit to how much light, humidity, and heat a lot of these materials and surfaces can handle. Did you ever have to change a project because the installation would be in a place that would be, say, blasted all day long by a south light with no trees blocking or anything?
I haven't yet, but now that you've said it, someone's going to email me tomorrow. My biggest problem, honestly, has been bubbling because the wall has to be prepared exactly right. I have to have the best installers, and I do. And in the past, when I've tried to work with installers that I did not do a full discovery on their reputation or something, it's not worked out. I'm a photographer. I work in Photoshop, and what I care most about is the photography, the research, the imagery, and then I rely on my printers and my installers to execute everything perfectly. And they always do because now I have the best installers and the best printers. But in the past, I didn't. I am a bit of an expert now in wall vinyl, and that came out of nowhere. If the wall's not prepared correctly, the wall vinyl is going to bubble.
You have to understand this stuff. If you're making art for yourself and it starts, peeling off the backing, within a few weeks or days or years, whatever, that's the nature of the beast. But when you're doing something like this for a client who's looking for a long-term investment, you have to understand the nature of the materials that you are using. That's imperative to the whole thing. Otherwise, you're not doing anybody. Yeah, you're going to
100%. Yeah.
You start talking about the collaboration, working with designers and architects. Now, no two projects are ever the same. Could you give us, if there's a such thing as a typical project, walk us through how things would evolve and develop? How does it go typically?
Yeah. So typically it starts with an introductory meeting. What are we doing? Are we working with an architect or a designer? Sometimes it's only on my own. And that, of course, is free and it's exploratory mode. And then for me, the next step is saying, okay, what's the environment? Measure the wall, get the logistics down. I can, at this point, project manage from beginning to end, or I can do part of it. This is quite boring, but then I have a proposal, send that, it's approved, I hope, and then we really start. And at that point, okay, are we researching historic photography? What is the space? What is the significance of the piece within the space? So in the past, for example, North Bar in Tribeca, that is a bar that I've worked very closely with. It's a cocktail bar. And they really wanted to highlight the oyster industry in Tribeca. So called New York City Archives, called like every museum in New York, did a big discovery on photography history. What could I get for free? What do I need to pay for? Researching maps and then taking photographs of Tribeca and the Hudson River and then bringing it together. The second phase is bringing together my photographs. Do I travel? It's all of my own photographs unless it is historic photography. And again, maps, fingerprints, whatever might be meaningful. And then the third phase is for me to sit at my computer and to take every little piece of it and start to play and put it together.
What programs would you use for that once you have all of your elements together?
What? I use Photoshop. That's all I use. Yeah. Okay. And I will say, I don't like learning new things anymore. I love Photoshop. For me, that was my digital darkroom. For me as a collage artist, that serves me really well. And I feel like for me, once I know a language, I know how to be creative within that language, and I want to focus on that.
Speaking of language, Have you played around at all with any kind of artificial intelligence, like Adobe Firefly, for instance, which is, if you have Photoshop, it's free. You get it included with it. Because it seems to be a tool that could be very, very useful for a lot of the conceptual things you're doing, because you're dealing with your artwork, and then through, verbal prompts, text prompts, you could change the image and play around with things. But it seems to me, from what I've seen of your work and listening to you, it would be a natural progression. And by the way, I understand that. I don't like learning new things either, but I twisted my own arm, and I've become very intrigued by it, with its limitations and ethical issues and everything else. It's a mixed bag. But have you tried it at all or considered
No,
it?
but let's talk afterwards. I guess I'm very rooted in the tradition of this software that has served me really well.
This is different, though.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing where, you're not going to mind being up at 2 a.m. You go, oh, I know what I can
Yeah.
do.
Well, and I think there's always a way to expand the creative boundaries that we're working within. So I need to probably learn new software. It's funny because within architecture, I've had people say, oh, you need to learn SketchUp or...
Right. There's all sorts of architectural programs
Yeah.
that would probably be useful.
And I think, oh, God, no, I just want to collaborate with architects.
So when you're collaging, is there any timeline or...
It's interesting because the timeline tends to be dictated by the timeline of the project.
Right.
So what works out well is that I work within the hopeful timeline of the project. But then, of course, anyone who's ever renovated their house knows that will be delayed like a year. So you tend to get a little bit more wiggle room. Timeline's interesting because I need a timeline. I need to know when something's due, or I'll say, oh, tomorrow. So it's good for me to have a timeline. Also, if it's a new construction, then I'm working with general dimensions that will then be altered. And then the entire proportion of the artwork that I've been working on might alter, and then
changes. Yeah.
everyone's upset. So it's a lot of fluidity. I had a project in Martha's Vineyard when I was still in Philadelphia. It was, okay, when am I traveling to Martha's Vineyard? When am I taking the photographs that are really meaningful? And then we were working with a historian who was providing a lot of historic photography. And then I was on his timeline. Something that is good on my end is that I don't need to have all of the control. I can work within a lot of flexibility. As a traveler, I can be very free-flowing. And when it comes to work, I can infuse a lot of that into the work and then say, okay, now we need to get on this. But, with the design projects, everything's dictated by the client and the architect. So it's being an artist within a very structured frame.
When you're conceptualizing and working on the creative aspect of coming up with the design, are you working on multiple options?
Yeah, I like to give 3 different concepts, but what I've learned is not to provide a concept that I don't myself stand behind.
Right.
Because sometimes people pick that one and then I'm not happy. To be honest, I like to give one option, say, do you like it or not? And if they don't, say why, and then to clarify the project from there.
Mm-hmm.
Because it saves a lot of time.
Yeah, that's sort of an ideal situation.
Did you ever try a thing where you give the one that you know is the one they should be using, your favorite and everything else, and then just throw in a couple that you know are horrible, just so it makes the one you want even better looking?
All the time. All the time. The problem with that is that then you have the other 2 designs that could represent you that you don't really want to.
Look, if the check clears, you don't have to keep it in your portfolio. It's all right.
I mean, the last 3 projects I did, I'm so proud of. This project in Martha's Vineyard and the cocktail bar in New York. If things could go down that road, to be honest, I know that I am doing a client-based business and the responsibility is on my end. But when I work with clients that are so fantastic, it's like that project glows. So not to say everyone needs to be this amazing person, but there is that collaborative part of it.
So what you're saying essentially is that you specifically pointed out the last few projects just really stand out for you. Is it because it was the optimum combination of your creative vision, the client's open-mindedness, and the ability of the vendors to manufacture and install and produce what you had in your mind's eye as a finished project, and everybody was happy. I'm assuming that that's what you're referring to, that everybody at the end of the day was happy with the process and the end result.
Yeah, everyone was thrilled. And for me, the installer and the printing, I don't even worry about anymore because I work with incredible people. And I come to the day of install feeling anxiety. And I don't know how to install. I'm there to get people coffee. I'm the assistant at that point. At that point, it's like, what do you need? I'm here to get it for you. On the production end, I feel 100%. Even in Martha's Vineyard, I worked with a brand new installer, but this woman was so phenomenal. And we met beforehand, but like, I didn't even have to worry about that. I think what was so fantastic about the last two projects in Martha's Vineyard and Tribeca was there was time to see the process through and to assert that the client was thrilled with the end result. With the collage, it's hard because you have to walk away from it. I don't know if what I'm working on is good or not.
Right. And when is it done?
And when is it done? And I often need someone else to tell me it's done or that it's good. Sometimes
Well, that's like having an editor.
it's an editor. Yeah, it's an editor.
You need somebody to bounce
Yeah.
these things off. You can't live in your own world. You can't.
My dad's a writer. A lot of my family are writers. So I'm very lucky to have this idea of write first, edit later, and trust your editor. So it's very similar. Yeah.
It took me a while to learn to trust editor. There's a fellow at B&H, Howard Godfrey, God bless him. I used to beat him up every time he touched anything I wrote. I used to just beat him up. And I realized he was doing me a favor.
Yep.
Hats off to you, Howard.
Yeah. I mean, they help refine everything.
Yes. Let's talk about gear a little bit here. As cutting edge as a lot of the work is that you're doing as far as installations and materials and ways of going about utilizing photography, you're working with very basic primitive tools, for lack of better words, Holga, Lomo, Diana, pinhole cameras, which has its own distinct look about it. Can I assume that when a project comes up, you're going to include that as part of the criteria of, say, what camera am I going to use? Say you have to go out and create, original, fresh imagery for a project. Your choice of camera and lenses is imperative on that. And if you use a Holga or Lomo or anything like that, anything other than a state-of-the-art mirrorless or DSLR or whatever, it's going to give you a very different look. Do you tend to lean towards the more primitive, playful cameras?
I do. But from my work now, believe it or not, it's my phone a lot of times. And then I work with a guru, Rob Wood, in the DC, Maryland area, who can take my imagery from my phone and manipulate it so that it translates beautifully to an entire wall. I also have a Sony A7R. I just bought here in Spain a Fujifilm camera because I was in the market for a Leica, but I didn't have 7K.
Why not? No, you just need a credit card. And then you could pay it off over 7 years.
Yeah. I know.
That's how you do it.
I know. But you know what I learned is that unless you have the full amount for the real deal, get the real deal from another brand. And Fujifilm was really recommended. And I tried the camera and I really liked it.
What model?
XT5. And for me, if I'm doing a collage and someone says, I want a photograph of, let's say, the art museum, it doesn't have to be the best photograph ever taken. It's going to be a puzzle piece woven into a collage. And it just needs to be high res. So that's where I know what camera to go to for everything. But that said, I don't work with Holga anymore. I used to all the time, but film became, as we all know, absurdly expensive. And the beauty of the Holga was the happy accidents and working in the darkroom. And now that that's not something that I do, film became an extra step that didn't support the work that I'm doing right now. Not to say I'm not going to go back to it, but it's hard. And I know a lot of us are film photographers. And I still consider myself one, but I'm not working with film. So it's hard. At this point, using my phone, I have an app where I can pick out my different film. And it seems very hipster, but it does, in fact, provide me with what I need. I mean, I hate it, quite frankly, because it was so much work to produce, to process, and to print.
And then scanning.
and scanning. And now all we do is like hit a button on our phones, and it's depressing. But at the moment, that's what I'm doing.
You mentioned this person in the DC area that you work with. Is he optimizing the images? What exactly is his role?
He's applying different filters. So
Okay.
instead of having an image look pixelated, it can look intentionally painterly. And I've worked with Rob to take a digital image for one of my clients, Brandywine Realty Trust. They wanted me to cover 3 floors, it's like 300 feet. And the normal photograph that I had, even though it was high res, was not adequate for that. So he really is a guru. And sometimes it's sort of like handing something over to a master chef. It's taking the ingredients that you know how to work with and giving it to someone who can work with it in a different way.
Or giving your negative to a master printer.
Exactly.
Can I assume that you're shooting raw?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That's what I'm doing. And there's an awful lot of data you get out of that. And while the nature and the aesthetic of the pictures that you get through any smartphone is not the same as you get from any other kind of camera, I don't think it's necessary to apologize anymore for using a phone.
I know.
I mean, that's really the truth of the matter
Yeah.
is, I mean, it's another tool. I go out, I have a camera with me, and I have my phone. I always have the phone. I don't always have my camera.
Yeah.
But one way or the other, I'm getting pictures. But, we that's a whole other topic anyway. That said, we are going to take a short break right now. And when we come back, more with Julia Blaukopf and wall coverings. Stay tuned.
Save time, gain space with all the right cards in the right place when choosing from Samsung's extensive line of memory products. From SD cards and portable SSDs to gaming NVMEs and USB flash drives, Samsung's full line of memory products covers all your storage needs. Head on over to bnh.com for more information about Samsung memory products or use the link in our podcast show notes.
Okay, we are back with Julia Blaukopf, and we have more questions about large-scale wall coverings. And let's start right over here. Finding the right vendor for producing these kind of installations is really important. You got to have the right vendor, somebody who's not just blowing wind at you, but really knows what they're doing with processes that do push the technologies quite often to extremes. Who owns this part of the project? You, the designer, the architect?
Oh, it's all on me. Unless a client says, I have an installer that I love, I have a printer that I love, great. Otherwise, I provide everything. So that part is all on me. And I work with MDC Wall Covering. They're based out of Illinois, but they have reps locally in Philadelphia, New York, all over. So even though it's a bigger company and it's coming from Illinois, it's still national, and it still feels like I have autonomy over exactly what's happening.
Do you find any of these companies are now reaching out to you?
Yeah, it's been great because they also have an in-house design studio. They've highlighted my work on their website. So they'll contact me and say, hey, we have this project. Can you provide this image? So it's been a business revenue as well for me.
That's important.
Yeah.
And that had to be satisfying when they're calling you at this point.
Absolutely. And they have spent time presenting their portfolio to me of printing on wood, printing on metallic, printing on Zintra, an acoustic material. That is so important in small restaurants or small spaces.
Was this actually designed for this use, or it just happens to be an acoustic material that works well with printers? How did all this come together?
Zintra is an acoustic material, and now we know how to print on it for longevity purposes.
Okay.
So it's very cool because we can apply art to it. But the functionality is, of course, the most important part.
Because it's true. I mean, if you want, you could print on glass, but you're going to get a lot of extra noise out of that. And so I imagine, I didn't even think about that, but when you're designing, say, for a restaurant or a gallery or something like that, the amount of sound reflection of the material, the acoustic characteristics are probably pretty important. So I didn't think about that, but the Zintra, that would make sense. Restaurants are noisy enough.
Yeah. Well, now when I go to a restaurant, I look around for the sound absorbency. And it's ridiculous. I'm like looking up at the ceiling, and everything is so space dependent. Can the wall vinyl be clean? Yes, it can. How do you clean it? Everything has to do with what is the worst case scenario. Someone spills some red wine on something, whatever it might be.
Now, for materials that absorb, and a lot of them do have absorption qualities to them. Do you ever coat them specifically so that they can be wiped down?
Oh, people have my work in the bathrooms. I'm like, so listen.
Oh, man. So now you have to spray with some kind of humidity sealant, something that will seal it in that sense.
I'm sorry, it sounds so scientific and it probably isn't that exciting, but it's about the coating on the wall and then knowing how to apply the wall vinyl on top of that, and then knowing how to clean the wall vinyl. Any bathroom in the US needs to have ventilation anyhow. I can't speak to Europe and other countries, but yeah. Sorry, I sound like a general contractor. But
No, you know something? Yes, in that sense. But the truth of the matter is, we're talking about a topic that is very, very specific. It's a specific niche. It's really unique. And these are the kind of things that you do have to deal with when you're doing this kind of work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds weird. I don't care about, if it's absorb moisture and all this.
I presume, Julia, this is some of the stuff that you were describing earlier that you've learned along the way to becoming a project manager to run these installations from the top down. All of these little nuggets of trivia are part of that skill set.
yeah.
I mean, did you ever predict that you would have to know about the, air filtration of American restaurant bathrooms when you started this?
Dear Lord, no. And I'm very lucky because I now have more of a community and very close friends in architecture and design. And I've always resonated more with creative people. And of course, architects and designers are exactly that. But I also have a resource that I can kind of harken back to if I need to. But no, I never thought I would have to do this. And honestly, a lot of it is trying to save my installer from listening to me ask him dumb things. Now I can assess a wall. I can say, all right, that outlet's there. It's not a problem, but blah, blah.
That's a great place to be. That's where you want to be when you're doing these kind of things.
Yeah.
You don't want to be just questioning people and assuming and hoping that what they're telling you is correct, and they're not just coming up with something just because they got more important things to deal with. I mean, the more you understand about a project, the better it's going to work out. You're going to walk away at the end of the day knowing that this was done correctly to the best of my knowledge and abilities.
It's a feeling of empowerment.
Exactly.
It is. And also, we can never assume. Yeah, it's interesting because I think with art, it's so subjective, and with how things work within an environment.
That's concrete, figuratively and literally.
And it's also sort of saying, well, what's the worst case scenario? I became very close friends with someone who worked at Franz Meyer of Munich, and they did the fabrication of the installation in the South Trade subway. And during Hurricane Sandy, as I remember, there was a crazy flood, but it survived because it just was so durable. It was like 8 layers of glass fused together per tile. And that's when I first thought, whoa, that's really cool. You can collaborate with fabricators who are more of an expert in how to produce your work than you are. And you can focus on the image. That's really cool. And that was the seed for all of it.
What would you say is the most challenging project you've had so far?
I'll say for Brandywine Realty Trust in Philadelphia, that was a really great learning curve because I had to cover, again, 3 floors. I'm going to make up the number, but let's say like 300 feet. It was a lot of square footage. I had to problem solve how to work with corporate, how to have many people on the email. And then also, that's when I met Rob Wood, this guru that I work with, who was incredible. Like I hit a point where I thought, oh, I'm the expert. I know what I'm doing. And then I hit a point where I thought, oh my God, I have no idea where I'm doing. And there's a lot riding on this. It wasn't my first corporate project, but it was with my installer. We had to worry about insurance and who was doing this. And do you have this kind of insurance? And we had to build scaffolding. That's when I was kind of thinking, whoa, what is happening here? Because that's when it got more into construction. And again, my installers are incredible. They're like, we got it. It's fun.
And used to think that cutting mats and framing was difficult, huh?
Right. Yeah, they're building scaffolding and they're wearing a harness because they're having to let down 4 to 6 feet wide panels, 30 feet. And they have to align them. And what I stand behind is that within wall vinyl, when it's one cohesive image, you don't want to see the seams. And my installers are experts at that. And I walk into places now and I see the seams and it destroys my experience.
Now, I imagine when you're working with vinyl, things like heat in particular would definitely affect that. Even if you get it, you nail it, and you cannot see a single seam. If the environment is hostile, it's going to undo your work at some point in time.
Well, the seams, the humidity, the bubbling, the preparation of the wall has to be perfect. I mean, a lot of things have to be really perfect. And there are people who are just so good at that. So
on a smaller scale, have you figured out a way of putting one of those little protective screens on the back of your camera on the LCD without getting bubbles?
Oh, that's so funny.
I can't do that. You're covering 3-story buildings without getting bubbles. Come on.
There's a certain point where you do things that are so complicated that you take a simple concept and you can't do it. Help.
Since you've started this project, because you've been doing this for years now, how has the marketplace for these types of large-scale photographic coverings evolved? Has there been a big change in it? Are people more receptive, becoming more adventurous?
I think so, from what I see. I know what my research was at the time when I started. And now I walk into a bank and see a photograph, black and white. And yeah, I think it's exploded. I think wall vinyl is very popular in the US. I know what I see just from the ubiquity of images consuming the wall within the US. But for me, it's sort of looking at that and saying, okay, how could I present something to a boutique hotel, a restaurant, a bank, or whatnot that would be more enthralling than a simple image on a wall? And working within the design, because I spent a lot of time working with art consultants, and art comes last within the design of a space. But what I love about my process now is that it's collaborative with the designers in the very beginning of a project, oftentimes. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, you're part of a greater entity.
Yeah. So I think the market in the US is really good now for wall vinyl.
Do you reach out to designers to let them know about your work? How do you market?
I do. I moved to Spain recently, so I'm in a bit of discovery mode here. But in the US, spent a lot of time presenting my work to architects, going to networking events, presenting my work to curators. If I meet someone who knows someone, reaching out to them, contacting them. And it's a gamble. For example, in New York, the project that I had at this fantastic cocktail bar in Tribeca, North Bar, 2 very empowered women who were working on brand new houses that they were building for themselves contacted me to say, we love your work. We feel very empowered and we'd like to hire you to create work for our houses. So I spent a lot of time reaching out to architects and designers.
Has this end of the photographic business become more competitive as far as you can see?
I don't know. I'm going to be honest. I don't know. I used to say that my biggest competitor was a can of paint. Because if we think about how to create our space or a restaurant or whatever it might be, you pick a really beautiful color and kind of create your space. I'm a color theory person too. So I don't think that's a bad way to go. I guess within the market, what would worry me about the work that I do is the good and the bad. I started doing this because I could affordably print my photographs on ceramic tile and glass tile. And the more ubiquitous something comes, the more affordable it becomes. And we know this as photographers. Spoonflower, Shutterfly, printing on cards, printing on whatever it is. I think I used Shutterfly for something and they wanted me to print on a fleece blanket. I was like, what? It's becoming so much a part of our everyday, we just print something on this. And what worries me is that it becomes so common that people don't expect to have to pay for it because there's so much competition. But ultimately, I hope that the industry of wall covering and printing on glass, which has many years of history in public art and private art, and there's so many fabricators that could talk about how many years they've been in business, translating art to mosaic or glass or whatever it might be. I hope there's still a lot of integrity in the actual art of it, but That might not answer what you asked me at all, so I apologize.
Well, aligning yourself with the architecture design community really helps to pad you against the low end of the spectrum.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, I want everyone to have access to the work that they want within their scope in their home. And there are projects where the production cost is far above even what their original budget is. So then that gets thrown out the window. Because printing and install costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
And that's often quite surprising to people. Yeah. So I apologize. I don't know that I have a real tap on the industry in that way, but
That's okay. That's all right.
So, Julia, in addition to all the large scale architectural projects you do, you're involved in a lot of social justice work and traveled to many countries in Africa, Sri Lanka, Panama, and throughout Europe. How do you connect with the organizations you work with, and how do you get compensated for the work that you do in those cases?
yeah, they're also different case by case.
I'm sure.
But when I worked in Kenya, I was still a student and I focused on the photographs that I took there. And after graduating, I spent a lot of time on idealist.org. I don't even know if that's still around.
Oh, yeah.
There was a nonprofit in Ghana, women's empowerment, that I connected to through idealist.org. And I sent my photographs, and I was meant to pay to volunteer. That's part of how they fund their own work. But I was extremely lucky in that they said, we really love the work that you did, this black and white documentary work using a Holga. And we'd like to waive all the fees and have you come here and work with us. This is 20 some years ago, I think. But that's where I learned to fundraise. I then interned a lot in school, and then I met another organization that became my fiscal sponsor. So that's how I was able to fund that first project. And then from there, I learned how to be creative within
Within the nonprofit world.
within a nonprofit world. Yeah, because it is very tricky, but it's so meaningful. And it's why I have my business, because it can never be fully sustaining. But then Panama, I mean, that was pure, I don't want to say luck, but Panama, I collaborated with La Loma, this eco lodge in the middle of a jungle in Bocas del Toro in Panama. And so I'm a traveler. That's another really big part of my life, my work, my world. That's just part of my makeup. That's something I really love doing. And so I said to them, hey, I'm about to go on another few months of traveling. I'm going to be working in Costa Rica. I've heard about you and your hotel, your eco resort is so fantastic. And I saw their website. I said, oh, I would love to provide some photographs for it. And that was an email thrown into the ether. Hey, I see this. What do you think? And they didn't get back to me for a month or something. And then finally I received word from them. They're like, yeah, stay for 2 or 3 nights. We love your work. Stay and photograph. And so while I was there, I saw that they were working with a cooperative of Indigenous women artists called Benore, which means beautiful in the Nobe language, which is the indigenous language in that part of the region in Panama. And I said, whoa, I love the work you're doing, trying to take the arts that are part of the history of the culture and translate that into something that could be sold to the Western market to help bring money back to support the business. Because a lot of times it is very important to have an audience in like a Western country. So that brought our conversation to, how about you stay with us for 3 months or 4 or 5 or however long? There wasn't a definition of it. And live here. We have a volunteer house and photograph and work with us. And that's how that came to be. I said, great. I'm going to put my life on hold for a second and live in a volunteer house in the jungle.
And what was the final product of that collaboration?
That was black and white photographs that I then layered gold. It was all of the women working with Benore that are on my website. But that is a series of photographs that highlight the women working within the organization. And that is what brought me to Spain, because I had an exhibition in Panama with this work that I'd been focused on for 6 years. And during COVID, living with these very strong women and focusing on these photographs, that's part of what kept me going creatively.
Mm.
And then last year, was able to go back to Bocas del Toro, exhibit the work, reconnect with the women that I photographed who had their own stories of working and living throughout pandemic. And then that brought me to Spain because then I had an exhibit in Horta de San Juan, which is outside of Barcelona.
Amazing.
Yeah, I can't even say the series has been phenomenally successful, but it's guided my life in this very funny way.
So you mentioned idealist.com. I assume that you were just like looking for organizations on that site and doing cold emails or calls or whatever. Are there other resources that you use?
Yeah, the one that comes to mind is transartists.com, I want to say. It's an older website because transartist now has a different connotation. But Idealist is the only one I can think of.
And the hotel in Panama that you contacted, that was just through online research on commercial sites?
No, that was a friend saying, wow, I just stayed at this absolutely amazing place. You have to go there. Their website's not great. Contact them and see what they say. And so I did.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of it is just throwing myself out there and saying the worst that can happen is I get a no. And with my commercial work, I often put together proposals that take me many hours and I never hear back.
And so you're cold calling people with the commercial stuff too?
No, I'm invited to submit a proposal and sometimes I don't hear back. But I think once the concept of the worst case is no became comfortable, I was like, okay, no problem.
Yeah. So what kind of things are you working on now? Do you have any upcoming projects or plans in the works or research that you're doing?
Yeah. So now I'm really focused on highlighting the projects that I've done in Philly and New York and Martha's Vineyard, working with my architectural photographer to document them and then marketing them. And for me personally, I'm living in Spain now. I bought a new camera and getting back to the fun of documentary and connecting to people and highlighting the work of women artists here and people to whom I connect. I connected to a really awesome man who's a mime. And I'm going to photograph the process of him going from Miguel to being a mime. He's kind of timid. And then once he puts the makeup on, he just becomes a character. Yeah, it's getting back to documentary work in a way and just connecting to people through photography.
And where can people find out more about what you're doing and your work?
My website is thefotografica.com and juliablaukopf.com, BLAUKOPF.com are the best resources, that and Instagram.
Great.
And I invite people to reach out to me if they have projects in mind, even if there's not a fully thought budget or something. I always want people to feel free to reach out to me because a lot of projects, either documentary, fine art, travel, wall vinyl, have come out of just starting the conversation.
And it may not be that project, but another one down the pike.
Exactly.
Because there's already been a connection and everything else. Again, it's part of networking, communicating.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm very open to everything. It's cool to not know what's going to come next. More than being alone with my camera and seeing what can come out of it, I think working with other people has been more magical than trying to control my own narrative, you know?
And now that you're in Barcelona, it's going to have a whole other twist on it because now you have little cultural differences and different points of view and stuff like that. It'll be a nice little fresh start. That's kind of very cool.
It is. Yeah. I'm at the middle point of my life a little bit and I've moved here. So it's lovely to be reminded.
Well, we only get one shot at this. This is not a dress rehearsal. So you're doing all the right things.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just keep doing them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a big experiment, but yeah, thank you.
Anyway, Julia, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you today. Interesting topic. I think it's great the way you had a little niche that you've created. And when you said that, yeah, people are actually contacting me right now. It's not just me going out trying to find work. That's a really good sign that you're doing the right thing when people start looking for you for what you do. And again, you've taken over the whole thing and from soup to nuts, and that's quite a good accomplishment for a creative type. And it would be really good if more creative types were able to be that resourceful. It's not always an easy mix. Most people are either business-oriented or creatively oriented. It's very few that can balance the two and make it work. So 2 points for you for doing that. And it'll be good to keep in touch with you and find out how you're coming along as time goes by.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time to talk to me about walls.
Walls and photographs.
It's a good start. There you go.
Yeah, thank you.
So again, Julia, thanks so much for joining us today.
Great, thank you.
Now, if you are a fan of the show but not yet a subscriber, head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts and click subscribe. You can also find us on the Explorer blog where we post photos from our guests along with our show notes. And please join us on Facebook at the B&H Photography Podcast group, where you can share your favorite photos and comments about the show. I'm your host, Alan Weitz. Jill Waterman is our creative producer. Episodes are recorded, mixed, and edited by technical producer Mike Weinstein. Our executive producer is Bjorn Peterson, and our editorial director is Sean Steiner. On behalf of everybody mentioned above, thank you oh so much for tuning in today.
Thanks to Samsung for sponsoring this week's episode.